What is going on, my mates? Hope everyone is doing very well. Welcome to the end of the decade once again. A week ago or so I put out my pop punk albums of the decade and it did pretty well and I had a lot of fun making it, so I was like, what the heck, let's do an emo albums of the decade list as well. Same thing as last time, we're going to be starting at 2010 and working up to present day, discussing my favorite emo release from each year and spend a minute or two talking about it. But this time I want to do something slightly different before we dive in. We got to do an honorable mentions list. We absolutely have to, because as I was making this list, I was like, whoa, this was a really good time for emo. For each year, I felt like I had to pick through so many classics and so many albums that I love so dearly, and even with this honorable mentions list, I still feel like there are a lot that are left out. But anyway, here are 10 rapid fire honorable mentions. I'm gonna say the band, the album name, and give you one sentence on why I like it. Honorable mention number 1, Pianos Become the Teeth, The Lack Long After. An emotionally intense emo / post-hardcore album that'll be there for you when the deep depression sets in. Title Fight Floral Green, the perfect amalgamation of emo, indie, pop punk, and alternative rock, featuring straight from the gut lyrics and compelling vocal performances. And then we got Basement, Color Me in Kindness, grungy emo goodness, taking lots of inspiration from bands like Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, and Nirvana. This is a really good fall / winter album. Boxing the Albatross. Twinkly, soft, and sometimes explosive emo and indie rock, featuring one of this decade's most interesting emo acts. Marietta Summer Death. A modern-day emo classic emerging out of the Philly DIY scene, Marietta captures everything great about emo. If you listen to them, you already know what I'm talking about, and if you don't listen to them, you should. Have Mercy, The Earth Pushed Back. An extremely promising debut from a band that ultimately ended up disappointing me. But man, this record is a freaking gem in their otherwise bland, mediocre discography. And trust me, it hurt to say that, but that's how I feel. Grandview, Everything Between Paint and a Wall. Grandview is the band that never was. This album is absolutely perfect and should have exploded them into emo stardom, whatever that means, but they'll forever be an underrated band that'll always be known by those looking for fringe artists. Better Off, I Think I'm Leaving. I swear, this band and this album is so good. Major, early, brand new vibes. Listen to the first 5 tracks of this album, they're so freaking good. Great Grandpa, 4 of Arrows. This album came out of nowhere for me and hit me like a ton of bricks. The vocals on here will decimate you. Honestly, prepare yourself before you listen to this one. Brand New Science Fiction. This band has a lot of controversy surrounding them, but that will never take away from how good this freaking album is, along with the rest of their discography. Alrighty, my mates, let's freaking do this. Just one last quick disclaimer before we go in. Every band on this list has elements of emo. You may not consider them an emo band, but I can assure you that some part of their sound is emo or influenced by emo. And I'm just saying this to try to avoid the blank band isn't even emo comments. But I'm sure this video will be flooded with them anyway, but that just kind of comes with the territory. I'm not even gonna lie, I sort of forgot about this band until I started writing this video. They were one of the bands that I discovered via Bandcamp along with other acts like Modern Baseball, Dads, and Old Grey. They have 2 LPs both titled Everyone Everywhere, as well as an EP that they released in 2009. This band sounds like a really nice mix of Algernon Cadwallader and American football, which I know sounds like an odd combination, but hear me out. Because sometimes they got some of those sweet guitar licks and more of those shouty, yelled vocals, but also have some mathy, twinkly sounding guitar parts like in the beginning of Raw Bar OPX 2002, very reminiscent of American Football's LP1. In a way, I kind of feel like this album was just released at the wrong time, because it feels like such a perfect emo release, but it is never brought up when discussing the classics. Even from just looking at the album cover, it looks like something that a 34-year-old dude would show me and tell me that this album is real emo and whatever band I'm listening to isn't. I can almost guarantee that if this was released in 1999 or something like that, it'd be up there with albums like this one and this one. But nonetheless, this is an incredible album that shouldn't be overlooked by any purveyor of the emo rock genre, so go check it out. This is an album that could have just as easily been on my pop punk decade video, but I've always considered Joyce Manor more of an emo band than a punk or pop punk band. But honestly, they lean into those genres more than emo, but they're definitely still an emo band, trust me. I even consulted this all-telling website. Joyce Manor's self-titled is among the greatest in their discography. In fact, I'd even argue it's their strongest to date, even though I'm kinda partial to Never Hungover Again. The opening track, Orange Julius, features crashing, distorted, fuzzy guitars with shouted lo-fi vocals to match. Frontman Barry Larry Johnson yells, "Stretching out cheap cotton over your thick skull, oh I do feel awful on the way to school," which is either referring to putting on a shirt or a beanie, I think, and it just reminds me of getting ready for school in the morning as a kid, wishing I didn't have to go and that I could just stay home and watch Dr. Phil. It gives me this sense of nostalgia. It makes me want to be 9 years old again and not have any control in my life and to be naive about everything. And the album cover even features a bunch of young kids. And here's a fun fact, did you know that the kids on the album are actually all of the members of Joyce Manor as young lads? Nah, I'm just kidding. That would pretty much mean that every member would have had to have known each other since birth basically, but it's kind of fun to imagine that's the case. The best part is that this whole album is a whopping 18 minutes long and 10 tracks in length, which means that this thing is filled with banger after banger. You can sing along with every single song and listen to the album like 50 times in one day if you really wanted to. I love Joyce Manor so much. I gotta be real here, I actually changed this one. Originally I had You Blew It's Grow Up Dude, which is a fantastic album no doubt, but the more I thought about it, I enjoy this Dad's album a lot more and am much more connected to it even years later. Dad's was a very interesting emo band that was reasonably popular in the early 2010s, and if my memory serves me right, it was just two young gentlemen hard at work making music and touring with this project. I'm still steamed, braised, and sauced about this, but I was supposed to see Dad's, right? It was July 3rd, 2014, about 5.5 years ago. I went to this venue called Strummers in Fresno, which is just a bigger, worse version of the town that I live in here in California. Tigers Jaw and Touche Amore were headlining with Dad's opening. We got there way before they even started letting people in, and I swear we were in the first front half of this long line, and I still effing missed the opening band, which was Dad's, because the security sucked so bad. The organization wasn't even poor, it was non-existent. But anyway, this record is great. You know you're in for some kind of emotional roller coaster when an album opens with "We water the plants even after they die, waste all our time in the helpless notion." And that pretty much sets the tone for the balance of the listen. The standout on this one is track 5, Jet Twins, a nearly 7-minute behemoth of a song. The emotions are palpable and you'll be able to feel all of them. It's the type of raw, authentic emotion that you can't replicate unless that's the way you're actually feeling. It's breathtaking. This band has a really long name. They're called The World Is a Beautiful Place and I Am No Longer Afraid to Die. But in my head, I refer to them as Twiabapa, but a lot of people simply call them The World Is. What makes them an interesting band and what makes this an interesting record are the styles of music they blend with emo, because it produces a very interesting result. The two main genres that are fused together are emo and post-rock, which go together like peanut butter and jelly, and then we have the bread, which would be indie rock. Compared to their previous work, this album features more post-rockiness than ever before. I appreciate the track variety and the order in which the songs are placed, because it feels like there are two types of tracks on here. Ones that focus way more on the post-rock / indie side, and then the songs that focus on combining emo and post-rock together. This is an album that requires your full attention to get everything out of it, but it's so worth your time if you have some spare attention. This is another example of a band very talented when it comes to pacing a song as well as an album. Nearly every track has a fuse that's slowly burning, which leads to the build-up and explosion found in many of the tracks. Knowing when to make a song sound big, small, quiet is a skill that I'm sure has to be developed over time, training your ears, learning what sounds good and what you like. One of the more popular tracks off the record that I'd actually recommend you start with features some excellent songwriting. It starts off small and quiet, builds up to the explosion, tapers off, builds up to another mini explosion, then beautifully walks itself out. You're severely missing out if you have not heard this one yet. This right here is one of my favorite albums of all time, and if you notice, I haven't said that about any other albums on this list so far, and I won't say it about any other albums on this list besides this one. I believe that it is the best album that this wave of emo had to offer. In fact, this album transcends emo as just a good musical album by a fantastic band. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think it's commercially viable or even super accessible, but I think the average person that enjoys music with emotion behind it could find something to appreciate about it. Now, I've made a whole video about how much I love this album and why, so I don't want to repeat myself too much and bore you, but for those that know nothing about this album, it's 9 tracks long and 36 minutes in length. It covers everything tragic and sad about modern day life. We see a haunting recollection of a friend taking their own life, being wrapped up in toxic relationships, struggling with your identity, it's all on here. And even if you've never experienced some of those things, it's presented in such a way that makes you empathize with those that have gone through those things, and it forces you to realize that those things could just as easily happen to you. There's no way that I could possibly convey the greatness of this album with words, so I suggest that you go listen to it if you haven't. Turnover is a really interesting band. They seem to reinvent themselves or make an attempt to evolve in a major way with each passing album. Sometimes it works extremely well, and sometimes it works decently well, like on their latest record, Altogether. But on Peripheral Vision, it worked well, almost too well. Many people love this album so much that they say it would be impossible for Turnover to top this record in their mind. On Peripheral Vision, Turnover make a lot of changes. Everything sounds hazier, dreamier, and warmer, with Austin's vocals sounding more subdued and mellow, without losing the emotion that everyone loves them for. I think this record did well for 3 reasons. Reason number 1, it's really good. Good music will always find a way, and this album is no exception. Reason number 2, kids basically thought that Turnover invented shoegaze, which of course isn't the case, but for them this was something very new and very good, so they took to it super hard. And reason number 3, I think it's just an overall interesting album because I've listened to my fair share of shoegaze. I'd say I have an extremely entry-level knowledge of it, but out of the releases I've listened to, I haven't encountered the type of emotion that's present on Peripheral Vision. And I'm not trying to say that shoegaze releases / bands that I've listened to don't convey emotion, because they do, it's just a different type. I'm not sure if Turnover will ever release another piece of music that tops Peripheral Vision, but I'll still be along for the ride, as I'm pretty excited to see what the next 10 years hold for them, because they seem like the type of people that want to try to do music forever. Pinegrove is an interesting band. Imagine emo mixed with alt country and sewn together with indie rock. If you've never heard of them, it sounds weird, right? It sounds like one of those things where it either works really well or is the worst thing you've ever heard. In this case, it's of course the former, because this album is truly magical. If you watched my pop punk decade video, I mentioned one of my old friends named Jonah that I met in 2016, and this album was actually the first thing that we bonded over, and the first time we hung out, I had no idea that he liked any of this type of music, so it was a very welcome surprise. You know that feeling you get when you begin to obsess over a new record you just discovered? Like you just can't stop listening to it over and over, and you get excited when you're off work or school so you can listen to it some more. And during lunch or on your breaks, you'll play your favorite songs from it, and that's how Cardinal by Pinegrove was for me. It reminds me of summer and fall 2016, hanging out with my cousin Ben and aimlessly walking around the almond orchards talking about our goals in life and where we wanted to go. My favorite thing about Pinegrove and this album are the vocal performances from Evan Stevens Hall. He sings softly, yells passionately, and everything in between. If you've never heard of Pinegrove, I suggest that you start with their album Cardinal and just click play. That'll be the perfect introduction to them. Movements is kind of a funny band, because they're an emo / post-hardcore band that's heavily favored by the pop punk scene. I definitely see parts of their sound that I feel lean toward pop punk and carry those tendencies, but I don't hear Movements and want to place them in the same category as The Story So Far, Man Overboard, and Transit. But honestly, I feel like pop punk is more of a culture and mindset these days than an actual genre, as non-pop punk bands have always been super relevant in the pop punk scene. Like for example, Knocked Loose right now, and then 5+ years ago, bands like Sea Haven and Balance and Composure were super popular within the pop punk community for some reason. Movements is a band that got me really excited. They gave me that same feeling that I got when I began discovering bands like them in the early 2010s, with groups like Tiger's Jaw, Basement, Touche Amore, Title Fight, and acts like that. I never thought that I'd feel that same giddiness and excitement again like I did when I was a teenager, but Movements are their own special beast. Feel Something stands out as a real, genuine display of human emotion in musical form in an era where feelings and emotions are fabricated, either to further the career of an artist or benefit the record label. But there's something about this album that just comes off as so real. I even felt that way within the first 2 minutes of listening to this band. Opener Full Circle flawlessly articulates what it feels like to be depressed, something that only someone who's experienced it could convey, and as someone who's unfortunately struggled with that before, it's clear that Patrick Miranda and Movements are the real deal. I put off checking out this band for so long. Don't be a dummy head like me, go check them out if you never have. Each year there's an album by a band that I've never heard of that ends up taking my album of the year spot or gets very high up there. Last year's Spanish Love Songs was the band and Schmaltz was that album. My friend Corey Purvis recommended me this late last year, and it particularly piqued my interest because he never cares for any pop punk releases and is super picky with music in general. So I was pretty keen on listening to this thing, and man, it crushed me. This album hits hard in every way. Instrumentally, lyrically, this thing is dark and negative throughout the entire listen. For this album, I'm gonna switch up the formula a bit and read you the lyrical content for the first song on the record, as I feel it really communicates the messages and themes of the album. Track 1 is called Nuevo. Make sure to go check it out if these lyrics speak to you at all. Is there any way to give a shit or wake up in the morning without taking a hit? I can't even walk down the street without someone staring at me like a high school friend they just recognized. And I can't help but laugh at these edge kids I used to mosh with at church hardcore shows getting blasted on Pabst and burning holes into the wall with their parliaments. It's a waste of time. Now we don't dance, we just sit on our hands looking hard in our pleather as we nod at the chicks and peck at our phones, holding on to what it means to be alone. Well, I'm miserable, which means it's me that hasn't changed or moved an inch out of this place. That doesn't mean I want to end up this way. Once again, a band that I have never heard of takes the place for my favorite emo rock release of the year. Origami Angel is an emo/pop punk band from the land of Washington, D.C., and I absolutely believe that these guys are the next big thing in emo. They give me the silly, goofy, carefree vibes that Mobo gave me. And I honestly don't know anything about the guys in this band, but just from the pictures and the music they've put out, they give me that feeling of natural charisma like modern baseball did. Origami Angel is definitely very different though. There are some parts of their sound that remind me of scrams, which I never really knew what that term meant. I just knew it kind of encompassed groups like Glockamora, Algernon Cadwallader, and Snowing. But there's something about this album and this group that feels incredibly fresh and new without doing anything all that different or new. I think it's just done much better than a lot of groups have in recent memory. The first track I heard off Somewhere City was Dr. Whomst, and immediately in my head I was like, yeah, this is fun. I like this. The lyrical content made me think of groups from 2012 or 2013, and it's just a feel-good type of song featuring the line, "I'm starting to like myself." But the first verse goes, "Oh my god, I feel just how I used to feel, watching Danny Phantom eating Happy Meals, every night at 7 watch my favorite shows, never really worried about the to and fro's of the way life goes." I'm pretty sure that by this time next year, everyone who listens to pop punk, emo, or generally keeps up with the scene of music will know who Origami Angel are. Don't sleep on Somewhere City. My mates, thank you so much for checking out my dang decade list on the emo rock and roll genre. Comment some of your favorite releases of the decade down below. Also, I can't believe we're almost at 30K. That is really absurd. Thank you mates so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.